Hey guys, it's Carla. Today I'm painting a very loose floral painting that will hopefully teach you to kind of relax with your brush strokes. So I've already got my base coat on there and it's dry. And now I want to start putting some color onto the surface. So this is just watered down, just a watered down green shade. And I'm just using a flat synthetic brush to brush this on. And then I think I picked up a little bit blue right here. Picked up more water, a little bit of blue. So I'm just adding some flavor to the background. And now I want to dry that because it's very wet and wipe off my palette there. So now with a palette knife, I'm going to mix up kind of a bright bluish purple shade to go back there behind the flowers. And you can play around with your background. The backgrounds are really fun to play with. Especially with a palette knife, but you could use other tools too. The palette knife just, I don't know, it gives a texture that you cannot get with a brush, so it's just real fun. Now I'm going in this diagonal direction because I want to keep in mind how my flowers are going to be laying on there. And I want most of this color to be right there in that area, but I don't want to leave those corners bare, so I want to drag some of that on out into the rest of the painting just to kind of unify everything. So just very lightly. All right, now with that dry, I'm going to go ahead and start on my my flowers. And what I want to do here is mix up a shade that, it's going to be dark at first, but I'm going to add white to it. A shade that can go in the center of my flowers. So this will kind of show me right here, I've got to decide where I want my flowers, like what kind of composition I want. So I want this one to be my main flower. And then I want this one and the next one to be the same kind as that one, but smaller and not as obvious. So those are the centers of my flower. So now I'm going to lighten it up. That I dipped my brush in over there is just extender. You can use extender or you can use water. But I lightened that up so it's the same color, just a different shade. And now I'm starting to form my petals. And I'm doing this, I'm not trying to make perfect flower petals. I want to keep it really loose. So each petal is usually 2 strokes, sometimes just 1 if it's like a side view of a petal. And I'm just starting from the outside of the petal and dragging in, and without covering up all my center. So I'm going to do that with all 3 of these. Now, this one is it's facing downward, and so a lot of these petals you're only seeing this edge of it. So it's going to be a different shape. It's not going to be necessarily a petal shape. And the same thing up here. This one is facing upward. So now with, this is just a flat brush I'm using, a flat synthetic brush. And with the corner of that brush, I'm just gonna tap in this dark shade right here to go under the center of the flower. I don't know if that makes sense, but it will after a while. These don't show much of it because of the way the petals are. Now with a very pale yellow, it's almost white, and with a clean brush, I'm going to start highlighting my petals. And as you know, acrylic paint dulls down, so this won't be the only highlight on there. But I want to keep it very loose. I don't want to slow down and try to make it all perfect. And these out here are not going to be as obvious as that front one, so everything needs to stay really, really loose. All right, now I'm mixing up a shade for the center, and while that dark that I put in the center, it's still wet, so it's gonna kind of mix in with this a little bit so that it's not so bold. And now with a clean brush, I'm gonna go in with just yellow, and with the corner of the brush, I'm tapping in some highlight into that center. And now this is just a clean, damp brush, and I'm dragging out some of that dark color because it's still wet. And this kind of softens everything up. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and mix up a dark green shade, thin it down a little bit, and start putting my stems in. And I want these to be quick and loose strokes, but I need them to go in the right direction. So I need to make sure that each flower has a stem. But there's going to be other flowers on here too, so I'm just kind of loosely brushing in other stems. And I just used the edge of my flat brush for that. So now I'm mixing up a shade for my blue flowers. Put a little bit of purple in it. And again, these are going to be very loose. And as I get away from the center of the painting, my flowers are not going to be as, not that they're detailed at all anyway, but they're going to be even less detailed as I get farther away from my focal point. So I thinned it down some more because these outer flowers not only are not going to be very detailed, but they're going to be a little bit lighter. So all you have to do there is just thin the paint down and it'll brush on lighter. And as you can tell, some of them are not even flower shapes, they're just brush strokes. All right, so I'm going to give each of these blue flowers a center, and some of them, those really loose ones, just barely get anything. So now with the light blue shade, I'm going to start highlighting those. I can't stress enough to keep everything loose. Keep your brush strokes very loose. Now I want like I said, I want my focal point to be right in the center. So like right here is where I want my focal point to be. So that's where most of my highlights are going to stay. So as I get out of that circle, things are going to get less obvious, less highlighted, less detailed. So all of my, or most of my highlights and details are going to be right there in that center part. And what that does is it draws the eye to the center where you want it, where you want people to look. And then the things that are farther away and outside of that center, they automatically know that those are flowers, even if they don't necessarily look like flowers, because their eye was drawn to the flowers in the center. So everything else is just, it's kind of assumed, I guess. All right, so now I'm putting in some of my greenery. I want it to stay loose too, so sometimes I just kind of smudge it out so that I don't have any hard, obvious lines. And there's places where I want obvious lines, but if I don't, then I'll just smudge it out with my finger. Again, I want to keep my brush strokes really loose. And in some of this, you can use this greenery to kind of define your flowers more, or define your petals more, and separate your flowers or whatever. So it serves different purposes. But I'm just kind of scumbling it in, scumbling, tapping, just keeping it loose. But you can see how that green is starting to make the flowers show up better. It's all about contrast. And now with a different shade of green, just some yellow added to it. You don't want all your leaves to be the same shade of green, so you always want to kind of put different shades in there. But you can start out with all of them the same and then just come back over them, or you can change it up as you go. Now this is just watered down black, and I'm just kind of putting in some darker areas for contrast, for depth. And don't forget to use your finger, because it's kind of like the palette knife. It gives you an effect that it's hard to get with anything else, with any other tool. So it's a good blending tool. All right, now this is just plain white because I want to put my brighter highlights in. And so with it being plain white, I don't want to use a lot of it, but on the very main focal points, I want to brighten it up with the white. Sometimes here I'm just using the corner of the brush, not the flat part, just to get some small highlights. Now with this dark, kind of reddish black shade, I'm gonna, with a lot of paint on my brush, I'm just tapping this in and then dragging it out with my finger in the direction of the petals. And this will just give that some more depth right there. Picked up some white, so I'm going to erase that with a damp brush. And now I'm just brushing in another shade of green. Like I said, I want my greenery to have different shades to it. And this, with it watered down, it softens everything too, so you can use it for both purposes. And now with purple and red, I'm going to water it down, or I used extender, but whatever, just thin it down. And you can still come back now and brush in kind of another flavor into the flower, into the flowers. So I'm going to use this for the blue ones and the white ones, which kind of unifies everything, brings all the colors together, brings the flowers together. But I want to keep my brush strokes going in the right direction, and I want to keep most of my dark colors in the center of the flower, not on the edge of the petals. Again, white paint dulls down, so you got to come back and brighten it up sometimes once it dries. So that circle that I showed you earlier, if you keep that in mind, you'll know where to put these highlights and kind of keep everything centered in your focal point. Now I'm brightening up because again they dulled down too, I'm brightening up my centers. And the farther I get away from my focal point, the less this is going to get highlighted. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and God bless you.